Great, thanks, Sylvia. So as Sylvia said, my name's Dr. Cloda Jenkins. I'm a Principal Teaching Fellow in the Economics Department at UCL and Associate Director of CTEL. What I'm going to talk to you about today is a project I worked on for the UK Economics Network last year, which was looking at how economics undergraduate degrees, how Economics Department tried to embed employability skills into the degrees. We did lots of different things. We did a review of the literature. We ran a survey of employers, which the Economics Network does every 2 years anyway. So we had a time series of data on that. For the first time, we ran a survey of economics departments in the UK, asking them really what were they doing around skill development. And we also ran 2 focus groups where we brought academics, students, alumni, employers all together to look at some of the results of the survey. Obviously, I've only got 10 minutes. The Economics Network website has the full report and lots of other information about the project if you are interested. Let's get this working. So one of the first things that we wanted to look at was lots of people talk about a skills gap in graduate outcomes, talk about graduates not having the skills that employers need. So we wanted to check whether this was in fact the case. And what we did was 2 things. We asked employers what their skill priorities were, and also whether they thought graduates had those skills. And it's worth emphasizing here that most of the employers who respond to the surveys are employers who are looking specifically for economics graduates. And in the survey of economics departments, we asked them to rank what skills they were prioritizing. And you can see from the table here that what employers are looking for, what departments say they're prioritizing. Top 3 skills are very similar, some variation, but very similar. But where the concern comes into play is that although departments say they're prioritizing skill development in these areas, employers still are saying, and this has been the case since the first survey was run in 2008, all the way through to our 2019 survey, that the graduates that they get don't have well-developed skills, in particular in communication, in team working and collaboration, going back to our previous discussion about whether we want to encourage or discourage collaboration. And also they have concerns that students don't have wider employability skills, mainly around the ability to learn how to learn, the ability to work by themselves, so independent self-management, but also around resilience and flexibility, which I guess future graduates will have a lot of after the COVID-19 crisis. So what we found, and it is sort of what triggered deeper analysis of what economics departments were doing, was although economics departments say they're prioritizing skills, employers still feel like they're not getting it. So that we looked at some possible explanations for this, both through the surveys, the survey comments, but also our focus group discussions were very useful for this. So one possible explanation for the gap is economics departments say they're prioritizing the skills, but actually they're not spending that much time on skill development. It's still largely about content, knowledge, and what Steffi mentioned earlier is the kind of Bloom lower grade levels of understanding. But when we started talking to economics departments and looking at the survey results, we realized that, at least from our respondents, and obviously there's a bias in the people who chose to respond to our survey, and we did get about 48% of the UK economics undergraduate degrees covered by the survey, that there was a lot going on in economics departments around skill development, some variation in the type of university, but what was clear was where there was a lot of activity, it was quite new. And in many cases was kind of at pilot stage. So maybe not so much that there's not enough being done, but it might be just too early to see the outcomes in the labour market. A second issue, which I personally think is a really important one, is when we dug into what academics actually said they were focusing on in terms of those kind of skill areas, they were quite different to what employers were looking for. So take communication as an example. Academics said they were spending a long time training students how to communicate, but when we asked how, it was very much around writing academic essays or reports in closed book exam type settings. Employers, on the other hand, were looking for students to be able to write very short, concise pieces of work, so executive summary type of things, being able to present their ideas orally and in writing, and most importantly, being focused on communicating with non-expert audiences. So the prioritization within a skill area is quite different between employers and academics. Another area where this came up was in terms of data analysis. So employers were looking for the ability to find the data, maybe even to create data where you can't find the data that you're looking for, to clean it, to make charts out of it, to have good data visualization skills, and less interested in high-end econometrics techniques. Whereas the academics were seeing data analysis skills very much in terms of the theory of econometrics and statistics, and less so in the ability to actually work with data itself and to work with it quite creatively. So they're just two examples, lots more examples of this different in sort of definition of the skills. Third area was economics departments say they're prioritizing skill development and they are doing a lot, but there is a difference in terms of whether they're doing it well. And in particular, so if you take something like applying economics to the real world, what employers are looking for is that they can give a question or a problem to a student, either in the interview or when they're at work, and the student can work out, how do I solve this problem? What bits of theory, what bits of evidence do I need to solve it? That's what they mean by applying economics to the real world. When we looked closely at what economics departments were doing, it was much more about, here's your theory, here's your models, and maybe a few sentences at the end of some real world examples. So students weren't really getting the opportunity to apply economics themselves. They were just hearing about how it might get applied. Other big problem is that although there's a lot going on in UK economics departments, it tends to be driven by one or two staff in most economics departments, probably the type of people who were at this conference. Other staff tend not to get engaged in this area for two reasons. One is they might be willing to do more around skill development, but they don't know what to do. So we talk about people never having left school, and that's true of a lot of our academics. So they don't really know what's needed in the workplace, so they're not sure how to develop workplace skills within their courses. The other issue, which is more important probably, is people who recognize, we're all economists, we optimize, that if they put time and effort to redesigning their course so there's more skill development, they have less time for their research. And it's their research which will get them promoted and get them other honours and other things. And the final issue seemed to be around that students didn't engage with what was offered in the first place. And then there was a sort of circular effect on staff that they got a bit despondent. So they put effort in, students didn't recognise the value of the skill development opportunities, and then lecturers wondered if it was worth their while in the first place. So of course we wanted to help people understand what they could do. So these 6 suggestions came from the literature, but also from sort of the leading economics departments who are doing best in this area. I'm going to go through these very quickly, but again, more detail in the report on the website. So the first one is really important. It works best if the senior management team make a push for it, so that it's department-led and everybody's working together. It also works best if it really is genuinely connected to workplace learning. That can be through internships and placements, but also needs to be through the type of projects they do, the type of essays they write, the audiences they write for in their work. Related to that is there's lots of evidence that students will learn the skills best in their economics curriculum. So not in a separate skills course, maybe run by careers or something like that, but learning their economics and their skills together. They also need to be doing this on a regular basis. None of us learn how to present by doing it once in a 3 or 4 year degree. It needs to be continuous opportunities, as low stakes as possible in the beginning, so that they can get the opportunity to practice without having the stress of assessment on it. I already mentioned that more active learning opportunities, more genuine assessments that look like workplace learning will really help. So better teaching strategies, lots of which are consistent with best practice pedagogy anyway, the type of things that people at this conference do anyway. And the final thing, and it relates a lot to what was talked about in the plenary session and will be more important with online learning, is you have to continuously communicate with the students. You have to tell them what skills you're developing in the module, what activity is developing what skill, and why it's important that they develop that skill. So often it's important for them to do well in the course and to do well in the degree, but also it's important for their interviews, assessment centres, and for working in their future life. So that message needs to be continuously repeated. And of course, assessing the skill itself will really help them engage with it, and having good criteria around the skill, which is not easy. Which brings me to my last slide, which is none of this is easy. And the most important thing is that we learn from each other. So there are people out there who do this really well. The economics departments as a whole who do this really well seem to have set up great structures so that people share experiences with each other and share materials with each other. They also use employers and alumni really effectively. So they recognize that not every lecturer understands what it's like in the workplace. So in economic consultancy or in banking or whatever. So rather than expecting them to learn it, they bring in the expertise from employers and alumni and get their advice. The Economics Network is also developing case studies. I'm at the moment writing a guide for lecturers on how to embed skill development into module design. It was nearly written, but now I have to sort of go back through it and think about how it might apply in a virtual world as well. And of course, we all love #EconTeach, but really don't underestimate how much we can learn from each other, particularly around this idea of a lot of this is just about teaching well, teaching students to do things for themselves, to teach them to learn how to learn, to teach them to work together. If you only did that, you would be developing so many great skills amongst your students. So just to conclude, any questions, obviously in the Q&A session, but you can contact me by email or on Twitter as well.